And the topic is about UX. Yesterday we had lots of different topics, and maybe the closest was accessibility. And now at least I hope to get understanding what is difference between UX and accessibility.
Accessibility?
Yeah.
No.
So floor is yours, and let's enjoy the next 30 plus 5 minutes.
Thank you. Hello, so my name is Greta Ruškienė, and I would like to ask you, dude, why don't you test user experience? So if you have never thought about your product as comfortable and easy to use, probably you have skipped UX testing in your development. So what I'm going to talk about today is I will explain what is UX, what to do if you have no UX designer in your team, where to learn about good UX, how to add UX, UI, and usability-related change requests, no accessibility, sorry, and how to build UX team without UX designer. So, what is UX? UX stands for user experience, which is overall experience of a person using a product such as mobile application, website, or computer application, especially in terms of how easy or pleasing it is to use. It's important to mention that UX is not an exact science, and user experience is based on previous user experience he had with other products he used. So sometimes people think that UI and UX is something that is the same, but actually no, UI stands for user interface, which describes how aesthetically pleasing product looks. So it contains visual design, colors, graphics, layouts, typography, when user experience explains how easy it is to use. So user experience defines interactions between those design elements. It's based on wireframes, prototypes, on conducted user researches and scenarios. So it's the best when those both go together. Also, some people think that usability and user experience is the same, but that is also not true, because usability helps to make product effective, efficient, easy to learn, errorless, and memorable. When user experience fulfills subjective user needs like satisfaction, enjoyment, pleasure, and fun. And most importantly, it brings value to the user. So we can say that usability fulfills product requirements and user experience fulfills subjective user needs as fun. So it's very hard to convince your company to mind UX, to pay attention to it. And actually, I've been in lots of situations when people say just test numbers, who cares how product looks, who cares if you cannot find some elements, and so on. So actually, bad UX, UI, and usability directly impact your business. And it goes for all of business, for mobile applications, for web pages, and for desktop applications. So first of all, we are going to talk about mobile apps. So bad UX results in bad App Store ratings. So in a result, you will lose and disappoint most loyal users, and you can scare off new users from downloading your application. So there's a nice example from Pokemon Go app. So we all know that games should bring fun, joy, and good time. But when games start being boring, it will be directly reflected in your App Store ratings. And we all know that people are not likely to change ratings from 1 to 5 once you fix your problems. So it's very dangerous. Also, bad UX impacts web pages. So if you have bad usability, bad user experience. You will get less web page visitors and clicks. In a result, you may have less sales, or users may be likely to choose competitors against your product. And if you will have no clicks and so on, you will be lower in search engine ratings, so it's going to be harder to find your application. And there's one nice example from brand Mingelmus. I actually like this brand, and I have a couple of these bottles, but the main purpose of this application is to sell me something. Yeah, and shop menu item is the last menu item in the list, and it's very, very small, so it's hard to find it. And once I click it, I can see this expanded menu with 3 bottles and some mats. But this information, there is no information about available colors, the volume of the bottles, and so on. So I have to click deeper just to figure out the differences between these. And to add to cart, I require 2 more clicks, and there's no social networks authentication. So I have to waste my time filling the forms. Also, bad UX impacts desktop applications. So users may be likely to favor competitors' programs, but with desktop applications, it's quite different, because people often do business-to-business applications. They think they are niche product, and they're safe from bad user experience, because people are forced to buy their product at some point. But if you will not invest in good user experience on desktop products, you will have to invest in other places, like you will have to hire a technical writer, you will have to hire a support team, and maybe you even have to do customizations for your users. So you will spend your money elsewhere when you could just do the product intuitive. And there's one example my colleague liked very much. She used to work with AutoCAD before. So AutoCAD is a very specific program, and it has this huge top menu bar, and there are lots of bars like these. So it's almost impossible to find required actions. So professional users are forced to learn all the keyboard shortcuts so they could use this application. So please raise your hand if you have or ever had UX designer in your team. Oh, great. Okay, so I believe that all of you can confirm that working with and without UX designer is way different. But what to do for those people that don't have UX designer in their team? I mean, some people have never seen personas, wireframes, and so on. And some time ago, I was one of those. So my UX story. I started working in a company as desktop applications integrations tester. So I actually tested Autodesk integrations. And actually, at that time, nobody cared about user experience, because we had Peter, who was working as technical writer, we have support team, and we even did customizations. But later on in my career, I was assigned to a brand new web page project where I met my first UX designer, Kate. And she was a great UX evangelist, and she used to organize those weekly meetings where she tried to drag all developers and KAs into a decent understanding what UX, UI, and usability is and how it impacts your customers. So this drastically changed my viewpoint, and it made me believe that I can do more than just checking the numbers. I can do impact. I can help users to understand the product without, for example, working in a sport. I can help them to have a better experience while using our product. So it was very, very fun. But later on, I was offered a challenging opportunity in another company. And they promised a lot of things. One of those things was UX team. But reality was that there were no UX team. And we had a quirky product. So I had to do something with that because I already had those tools that my previous UX designer provided me. So what to do if you have no UX designer on your team? So easiest answer would be get one. Come on, it's obvious. You just hire a person. But it's actually not so easy because first of all, you have to convince your manager that it's important. Later on, you have to convince your team that it's important. And maybe even all company that you need a UX designer. And believe me, all good UX designers are not unemployed. So hiring UX designer can take half a year or even more. And I would highly recommend you being of that hiring process because you will have to spend lots of time with that person. So yeah, our last UX designer hiring took more than half a year because we had no dedicated people to interview this person because we had no skill set like that. So yeah, so I decided to move on and somehow help my team to understand what users feel like and why we should work on UI, UX, and usability. So first of all, I think you and your teammates should get familiar with UI and UX guidelines. Because these are the guidelines you can attach to bugs and say, look, the positioning of buttons is incorrect. We're not going to be accepted in App Store. And that's it. But make sure that you learn from correct technology guidelines. Because, for example, if you learn from iOS technology guidelines, you will not be able to apply them on Android devices, and so on. Also, I would recommend learning from Coursera, YouTube, and so on. Because user experience is subjective, and not everything that suits other companies will work for you. Okay, since you have learned it, start smashing it. Start adding those bugs and make backlog expand, because that will bring attention to your work and to that issue you have. So I would offer starting with a simple UI check. So make sure that everything is aligned, that text sizes are correct. Later on, move on to usability of a product. Make sure user never sees 500, 401, and so on errors, no red crosses, no warnings once you click back, and so on. Also, make sure that things execute expected actions. So for example, we had this order system, and there was archive button. That sounds great. I archive, it goes to some archive folder, but in reality what it did was deleting orders. So you clicked archive and your order is gone. So make sure you have no things like that. Later on, I would suggest testing workflows. It's like some flows with multiple steps. Why it's important? Because users should be in control. So users should be able to click back, to cancel at any time, and he shouldn't be like a slave of your application. The application should be a slave for him. And later on, I would suggest analyzing user data. So you can use mouse flow, app insights, and so on. So you could figure out what your user does. Because at that time, actually, I never had a chance to talk to a real user. I have quite long QA career, but yeah, but I never had a chance to see or talk to a real user. So you somehow have to understand what he does, how he feels. And more on analyzing user data, I would recommend reading user emails carefully. For example, if you have some feature and user is struggling with that, so he was trying to find that feature, and later on support team said, you go to that menu, click something, and there's a feature. Maybe that means that feature is placed incorrectly and usability is very bad. And the last thing, waiting is painful. So there's scientific proof that waiting for more than 5 seconds for young people sends similar signals to brain as pain. So literally, waiting is painful. So add a bug for that. Okay. I tried several different techniques on my developers, and I noticed that they actually hate when I point things in the later stages of development. So I decided to try paper prototyping prior to implementing some feature. So it's very easy. You can try this on real user. That would be very perfect if you could contact those users. Second level would be contacting other team members and asking for their time and feedback. And yeah, if you have no chance to disturb other teams, then you can do this exercise with your team. So you basically have some features you already have in your application and some new features you want to add. So just paint them, cut them, and ask users to ask your test group to align them in whatever way they want. And you can end up with different results. So for example, for one user, it's very important to create something. So he will put creation, editing, or delete buttons in the top. Or even more, he can add social networks after every new or something like that, because that's in his nature. And for other users, it may be very important to search for information, not to add the information. So you have to understand how your colleagues think. Another thing my colleagues hated, that I added bugs and never described how it should look like. Because if you want to make a change, people want to see it. So I started making examples of what I expect with Paint. So I just crop and move items. It's very easy and it's very convenient. But unfortunately, I cannot use real data this time. So I will show just Gmail example. So first of all, I never noticed that Gmail has a calendar, because for a user like me, calendar should be on the left, not in the right, like in Outlook and other products I used to use before. So that's my expectation. Another thing, my email box become like litter can, because it has thousands of categories and I'm not following up on that. It's just too much for me. Another thing is this Hangouts item. I rarely use Hangouts, so I never noticed that it's there. Maybe I would have used it if it would be closer to the actual items. Another thing I think is important is this storage manager, because I have so many letters, I'm gonna run out of space. So maybe I don't understand why it's floating. That all bottom is floating, and it looked weird for me. So I thought it's gonna be a good example. So I just did this prototype. The changes are not very visible, but that can show developers what you expect from them. So basically, I moved my calendar to the left, I minimized the amount of groups, I moved the storage here, and I moved Hangouts closer to the conversations, and moved all the things down. That could be an example of some screenshot you can add to your bug, so developers would be aware of what you want from them. Yeah, another nice thing, those screenshots also works very well in usability labs. So, for example, you have some dialogue and so on, and you want to convince your developers to do so, because just adding a bug is not enough. So you can prepare two options for discussion. So one can be a real product, and another can be made with Paint or something like that. Prepare simple questions like, what do you think this button do? Where do you think it should be placed at? What should be the end result? And so on. That would be also ideal if you could ask for client's time, but I don't have this possibility. So I can ask for up to 10 minutes of other team members' time. But in this exercise, your team members cannot participate because we have like prior understanding of how things work. Later on, when you will question them, just sum up results and present results to your team. And please don't get upset if your own idea is not being selected, because sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but that's a good practice in understanding how people think and what they expect. So another thing I like to use is mouse flow. So actually, it's a very, very nice heat map. But in reality, we don't have this much user to make these nice things. So actually, what I see in my application is a couple blue dots, but it still indicates where people go and where they click. So it helps to understand user needs. It also helps you to find patterns in user activity in your application, because you can see anonymous user recordings with removed login information and so on. And also it can show you painful and unclear areas, because if you can see that for 5 minutes user is just moving his mouse, there's something wrong, you probably should contact user and ask him what is going on. Maybe he needs some help, maybe he's not finding something, and so on. Also, it can help you to position most important actions in the best flows. So you wouldn't have to like click in one corner, then move to other corner, and so on, while doing one flow. Next thing I would offer is questioning new features. So most importantly, get yourself involved in early stages of decision making and ask questions. Also, think about all possible interactions of new and all features, because what our team usually ends up with is adding new feature that is destroying all other features that are related to it. Also, always ask question, what problem does this button solve? If there's no problem, it's likely that we don't need that action at all. Yeah, another fun practice from my previous UX designer, we had UX UI Hall of Shame, or Fame, you can call it Fame, to make it more nice. So I highly recommend doing this in big corporative companies, but please don't do it in startups or one-product companies, because it will feel like shooting your own leg. But if you're in a big company, this will bring awareness that there's such a thing as UX, that people care, that people interact with it, and it will also make fellow QAs and other developers to like play around with this. So what you need, it can be like Slack channel, it can be whiteboard with magnets or something like that. Just a dedicated place for UX shame. So I would offer starting with other companies' products that you use daily and hate. So for a quite long time, in Jira we had this horrible issue that once you right-click, the menu appears far away from the item. So that would be a perfect example that we all hated and we all complained about that. Later on, collect good examples from your own product that you are proud of, and also add examples from internet, like comics from UX Live and so on. Later on, finish off with all the UX and UI examples which needs improvements in your product, and ask your colleagues to do the same. Okay, so what results did I get? So from 8 developers, 5 developers are already familiar and very good with user experience and UI and usability. So I'm very proud of that because we never done that before. And what I recommend you, concentrate on people that wants to change. I mean, you can try changing people that don't care about UI or usability, but you will get no results and you will lose your passion yourself. So I would say find an ally and work with them, and maybe one day your developers will beat you with experience like mine did. So we were discussing this checkboxes functionality, and we clearly saw that something is missing, but we didn't know what. And apparently we were missing hover state. And I was very proud that he noticed it, and he said that there is a small UX guy in him. And I'm very happy because of that. So what I would offer in testing UX, UI, and usability is having fun and not getting too serious, like laugh about it, tease one another, and make things fun, because your product should be fun for you if you want it to be fun for your end users. Also, stop talking about business-to-business applications. All users should be respected, and they all have to do nice things, and also follow trends. I mean, we all want to be like Facebook. Sure, we cannot like change every 2 weeks when we see something new, but still, we don't have to create ancient applications today. So about the fun part, so a couple of my developers were from Microsoft. And once I was in struggle, I always offered Clippy. So if it's very complicated flow, I try to tease them that we should add Clippy to our application. And apparently that was a common joke for them, because we used to offer this in Microsoft too. Also, we were content and data-driven products, so screen space was very important for us. And we had these nice white boxes in our products, but this time I used different example, still because of sensitive data. But in that cases, I like to put a cat in a box, because cats like boxes, and just add screenshot like this to your bug. I mean, it will cause your developers at least to laugh or ask, what the is this? So it's still gonna be entertaining for them. One of the last things I want to share is, please don't get used to your own product. Don't fall in love with your product, because if you will take a couple steps back, you will notice that your product is old and rusty and it needs repairing. Another thing I want to mention, that even when we hired UX designer, for more than a year, she's still coming to me and asking for design reviews. Because UX is not a single player, it's a team effort. Yay, and the last slide. So what I would like you to remember from this presentation is not some techniques and so on, or tools. Just remember that UX has direct impact to your business, so it's important to learn about it. You will not necessarily apply it in your daily work. Also, you should try at least to work on UX and encourage your team to do the same. Also, I think it's very important to add UI, UX, and usability-related bugs, although sometimes you will get comments like, you should work on serious stuff and so on. But the visibility and backlog will remain. Also, you can and should have fun working on UX testing, because if you do, end users will also feel that. Thank you.
Thank you, Greta. Now, time for questions. I would like to see your hands. Who is the first one? 0. Then I use the opportunity and ask a question. Before you started, I asked that what's the difference between UX and accessibility? Is there anything common in those two areas?
I mean, you can think about accessibility as UX for a specific group of people. So it can be like subcategory of UX, something like that.
Okay. And actually, I have seen those cats not only in your presentation. I have heard about cats earlier also. Quite. Why cats? Why not dogs or snakes or whatever else?
Okay, so there's all story about the cats. So we have a colleague that hates cats, and his wife was pregnant, and he had to buy her a cat. So that's why we're still joking about cats, although 2 years passed from that time. Yeah, and he still hates cats, so it's okay.
Oh, okay. Have you had time to think about questions? Okay, if no, then no. At least I have one small box for you also.
Oh, thank you.
This includes some stuff for testing.
Okay.
And actually, yesterday we just had one session when the speaker demoed the content of the bag to the audience also, so we can actually encourage people to send submissions for the next year. So if you look into the bag, what do you think, what could be the reason to come here next year as a speaker?
No, I mean, if I show, I will have to share.
No, this is just for you. It's
Okay, what should be valuable to share? If I will manage to open. I don't want to break it. Okay.
You can use. This is not usable, probably.
Yeah. Usability issues. I mean, it's a very nice box, so I don't want to destroy it permanently. Why you should participate next year? Because you're gonna be the unicorn.